welcome to the next episode of It's Your Time to Shine, a podcast about being a mom in a modern world. My name is Jaspreet Kaur, and with me is my friend and advice columnist, Lisa Vora. Hi, Lisa.
Lisa Vora at your service. Tell me what's on your mind today.
Well, Lisa, this is the last episode in a 3-part series where we have been talking about marriage, relationships, and communication. Last time I was asking you what to do when we were asked for marriage advice. And so I've been thinking about it. Honestly, I do kind of think it depends on our personality too. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it's your personality, your experience, your relationship with that person. I mean, I think that there's so many different factors you have to consider before, giving advice. And you have to be careful in what you say as well, because it also depends on their personality, how they're going to take that advice.
Have you heard of this, like these 3 characteristics? It's a triangle: the dictator, the victim, or they call it, some people call it the helper and some people call it the saver. Have you ever heard about these 3?
I mean, I've heard different variations of the same philosophy, but not this particular one.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I did this thing for work to try to figure out who you are, and they're like, who do you think you are? You read the description. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then they're like, now, how do you think you show up at work? And people are like, they have these 3 dots on the floor spread out, and you go into the section that you think you are. And then they're like, but to really be honest, the better way to know who you really are is like, imagine your child pours a glass of milk and you tell them, let me pour the glass of milk for you. It might spill. And they go, no, I got it. And they pour it. And then as they're talking to you, they're looking at you and not at the glass, and they're pouring the milk onto the counter and onto the floor. What is your reaction?
This just happened yesterday.
So what's your reaction? Which one are you?
I let her do it, but I help her when I know she's going to spill it.
No, as she's spilling it, what's your reaction?
Oh, my reaction at that point is just like, let me think, because it really has happened. I'm just very much like, oh my God, Allie, it spilled. I'm like, that's okay. And I'm like, at least you tried. And next time you'll do it. I really am like, that's okay. I don't get upset.
You're the helper. I'm the helper too. Like, okay, I'll help you.
Samir gets upset.
But, it was funny because we were in that class and they gave that example. And there were some people there who didn't have kids. The instructors, the facilitators just trying to help you get into the right frame of mind. A bunch of people went from helper to dictator. They were like, oh, yeah, I'd totally be pissed about that. And they moved over. And I'm like, that's such a because we're our real selves with our kids, right? There's no power struggle. There's no political correctness. There's no how are other people going to perceive us? How we respond is real.
I literally see it from her perspective that the poor girl wanted to pour it and she wants to get it right and she wants to do it by herself. And I don't want to deprive her of these really important traits that we're trying to teach our children.
Yeah, the only time I become the dictator in that, I'm with you totally, is the day after or the day that I've just mopped the floors. And that's the day that things spill in my house. Big things, not little things like water. But sticky things and oily things.
There's always right. Oh, yeah, well, the next day I would be like, all right, so today I'm going to help you because yesterday you spilled it. And then I feel like there's an attribution, Yeah. And we'll work on this together.
That's how you improve. So. I let them do it again the next day. And then I'm like, what? Come on, guys. We can do better than this. I gave my kids the funniest lecture about how to open a cereal box the other day. I'm like, we're good people. And we're smart people, and we are not heathens. And the way that we have opened the Honey Nut Cheerios, we're better than this, guys. We can do this. And my kids were laughing, and I'm like, it's not funny.
It is a little funny.
This is abysmal. I was like, I would be embarrassed. I was like, if God forbid something happened to me, someone has to come in here, take care of you, and seize your cereal boxes. You're not gonna get any respect from them ever again.
I actually use a scissor to cut it, so I'm like, whatever.
Do you really? Oh my gosh!
And then I clip it nicely. Well, I usually put it in a.
You put it into a Tupperware, don't you? Tell the truth.
Let's not go into my OCD.
Oh my gosh.
I'm right now so frustrated because this place is upside down because we're moving.
And by upside down, you mean there's a pair of shoes by the front door that's not on a rack.
That is upside down for me. So
it's like, I know you so well.
Well, our house has been, we've been showing our house and stuff. So everything is just thrown into the garage. Everything. So our entire garage is our house. People at the open house a few days ago, do people even live here? And I'm like, go into the garage. You'll see we live here.
But that's a really big compliment, right? If they think that no one lives there, that means you're really getting it ready.
That's because we threw everything in there. Everything's just, anyway, it's so just disorder. But it's okay. I'll bring order back once we move. So it's fine.
Yeah, I think like moving, you got to just give yourself a break and don't measure on that. And you know what I love about moving? I hate moving. But the one thing that I love about moving is you end up getting rid of stuff that you don't need.
Yeah.
And hopefully not buying something new to replace it.
And that's what I'm looking forward to, because I actually do think I have a problem when it comes to order. I want things to the point where like Samir's obviously never cares about a lot of things. And I both admire and I hate him for that, if that makes sense. Like, I wish I didn't care. And why does he not care? You know what I mean?
You admire him, but you're jealous of it too, right?
Yeah, I am. Exactly. So I actually think it's an opportunity for me, because I really do always want order, and I need to learn to live a little bit in chaos. I actually need to learn that. So I'm learning. You know, I almost had a breakdown 3 days ago, but I'm learning. So I know what's important to me, though, and things I won't give up. So even in all this disorder, I still want to eat right, and I still want to get a workout in. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter how disorder, certain things I won't compromise. So
yeah, both of those seem pretty reasonable to me. The beauty of the chaos is you're going to get through it, and maybe you'll be like me. Maybe you'll come out the other end like, oh my gosh, I don't care about. Well, for me, it was making my bed. We know you're not going to give up on that. But maybe it'll be something else, like the organization of something.
I actually want to be able to say in a few months, oh my God, I don't care about this and I used to. I think that'll be growth for me.
No, I think that's awesome. I have to share a really quick story that I have a new boss at work, and we're just getting to know each other. And he told me the most profound thing yesterday, and I have to share it with you. I was like looking forward to telling you about this. So I'm going on a trip for about a week, and he asked me, oh, so your husband be fine for a week with your kids? And I said, oh, yeah, he's a good dad. And he started laughing. He was like, even if he wasn't fine, that wouldn't make him a bad dad. And I was like, no, I know. But I'm just saying, like, according to the roles and responsibilities of a dad, if you think of it as a job title, my husband is very good. Like, he can hang out with them. He wakes up and gets everything done according, like if it's on the calendar, it will get done. And he cooks. Like, what else do you need? And the guy was kind of laughing. And I said, didn't you have times where you had to take care of your kids? And he goes, oh yeah, but I have a lot of built-in infrastructure. And I didn't know what he meant by that, right? So he said, do you have help at home? And I said, no. He was like, do you have a nanny or anything, family? And I said, no, all my family's in Washington, D.C. And my husband's family is like in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia. So everyone's on the East Coast. And he said, oh, yeah, I have a lot of infrastructure. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I have a woman that comes every day, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 2, and just does everything, like changes the bed sheets, does laundry, tidies up.
Oh, wow. Every day?
Every day. And I was like, whoa. And I'm like thinking, oh, my gosh, this guy is a hero. Like, this is so awesome, right? And also, how much money do you make? Because I would like to be able to do that.
Yeah, geez.
And then he goes, but wait, he's not done. And then he was like, and then every day after school, I have another lady who just picks the kids up from school and takes them to after school activities. So tennis, baseball, football, gymnastics, like whatever's happening, that person's basically like a driver.
How many kids?
2 kids. And then a third lady who lives in the neighborhood who brings over food. So he was like, she brings food like most nights, like Monday through Thursday. Most nights she'll bring like sabji dal. So she's like, the guy is Indian and this lady is Indian. She's making some Indian food for them and bring it over. Mm-hmm. And I was floored. What's your reaction?
I'm floored. I mean, I'm like, wow. Number one, how can you afford it? But 2, I mean, how much time are they spending with one another in all this?
Yeah. Well, because I heard that, and like I was telling someone else about that. I was telling my mom about it, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, that's too much." And I was like, our gut reaction is to be like, "Dang, like raise your kids yourself, right?"
Yeah.
But why? It's actually brilliant. Like, you're not spending time cleaning and you're not spending time cooking. And I hope they're just doing Netflix marathons and like having fun together.
I mean, obviously there's a trade-off, and hopefully the trade-off meaning that, like, I think we've all talked about it. I don't mind spending money for things if it means I can buy time, you know?
Exactly. And that's exactly what he said.
So obviously they have bought a lot of time. Hopefully they use that time, like you just said, Netflix, and then spending time with each other and their children, using that time to spend quality time with one another.
No, totally. And I'm going to assume like they're spending a lot of quality time together because they're happily married and the kids seem well adjusted and happy. And he's like, we were very clear. My wife and I, when we got married, were very clear about what we were going to outsource. They're both like born and raised in India and then came here for grad school and then lived here. So I think this idea of having help around the house is an Indian
Yeah.
concept, right? Like
Right.
that is more foreign to us as Americans and less foreign to them. But I will say, like, American culture, we have this stigma, whether it's right or wrong, that the more we do, the more we like are slaves to the schedule and like taking our kids to every single class and being there with them. Being there to cheer them on is a different thing. Throw that out for a second. But being there to drive them around and like be exhausted, we think that's like a badge of honor, right?
Right.
We think like if I cook and I do everything and I don't get help, like I'm winning. I'm going to get a trophy of some sort, or I'm going to get some karmic points or something for it. And it's kind of cool to just be like, you know what? No, I'll just pay for that. And if you can pay for it, that's cool.
And also taking your kids to soccer and all this, that's fine. That's like if you pay someone to do it. I'm just saying that as long as later on it's made up for somehow, and I'm sure it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like their aspect of it was like, hey, this person's going to drive you because I can't pick you up at 2 because I'm working.
Yeah. And that makes sense.
And then they'll take you to practice. And I'm sure when it comes time for the games or the competitions, like they are there because there's the quality time aspect. And I'm not saying you should outsource the loving of your child and the cheering for of your child.
But if they can afford it, more power to them. If they can afford it, that's awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty incredible. And I heard about it, and everyone's reactions to him saying that was so different. And I was like, oh, I was more looking at other people's faces, and just seeing how people were reacting and whether they thought it was like acceptable or right or wrong or whatever.
Well, the knee-jerk reaction is like, okay, but then when you break it down, you're like, oh, okay. That's kind of what.
Yeah, exactly. And if you break it down, it's kind of like, okay, you had the foresight to like ask this lady to like make certain things for you for the week. I do the same thing when I just pick up pizza on the way home sometimes because we're exhausted. I'm getting somebody else to cook for me, but we don't think of it that way, right?
I would love it, though. If I could afford it and having all this order so that I can use the time for myself and to be with my family, I would do it.
And the funny thing is that I said to him like, oh yeah, I'm going on this trip. And then next month, the whole family's going on another trip. And he was like, oh, you guys travel a lot. And I was like, we really do. Like my husband has serious wanderlust. And I kind of fall into that with him. Like we like traveling and we don't skimp on experiences. But as a result, we don't have, for example, a nanny who will drive our kids around. And he was laughing. He was like, yeah, when you spend money on that stuff just to make life easier, then you don't have many vacations. Like he was saying, it's all a trade-off, right?
Yeah, true.
So I'm like, make your own choices. But the thing I loved, I made a joke to him and I was like, well, you guys I said, it sounds like you guys made a smart choice because I can't tell you how many fights we've had over both me and my husband working and no one made dinner and then being like, well, why didn't you make dinner? Well, why didn't you make dinner? Like it shouldn't fall just to the woman or it shouldn't fall just to the man. And he was like, yeah, just having that. So I was impressed at having that open communication to decide what is important because he was like, my wife does not like to cook and I'm not a very good cook.
They seem to have defined their roles and responsibilities and they're on the same page.
And she's an attorney, so maybe she drafted an agreement for them also.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, though, like roles and, how we've defined our roles in marriages and whatever relationship and how it's evolved over the course of time.
Yeah, and I think even like a marriage today is not the same as a marriage 5 years ago or 10 years ago within the same couple. Like I feel like there have been role reversals and role evolution that has happened. Absolutely, when you look back 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, there's been huge changes. But when I think about, like, when we had talked previously about in a podcast, probably going back last year, about when we first got married, how I really felt like my responsibility as a good Punjabi wife was to cook all the meals. So, like, if Budham said, oh, I wish we had chicken curry for dinner, I was like, I will do this. I will go get chicken. I will make garam masala. I will chop everything, and it will be amazing. And then my husband will taste it. And the sky will open and, the heavens will shine down on us. And now sometimes he'll be like, oh, I feel like having this. I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds good. Let me know when it's ready.
You don't try as hard, right?
And it's not that I'm not trying as hard. It's like I've accepted some of the responsibilities of the role and I've let go of some of that ideal chasing up for perfection too.
I was joking with Samir's parents last night because his mom gets her rotis made. Rotis, Indian bread.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, there was a time back in the day where rotis was like how they judged women before she went into another household for marriage.
Oh my gosh, totally. So she orders them like pre-made?
She has an auntie who makes it for her, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And that's pretty common. Like my cousin does that as well. Her and her friends will have this auntie who makes like 150 rotia, and then they buy them off her and split them.
Yeah, that's a great business. I wish I could make rotis, but it wasn't part of my criteria for marriage.
Yeah, but you know what's funny? Like, okay, honestly though, because this is how we get brainwashed. This is how the system brainwashes us. Like when people say they buy rotis and stuff, I'm like, that's cool if you want to do it. But if someone said like, hey, do you want to buy rotis? I'd be like, la, main nahi roti bana sakdi. Like, I can make them. I'm pretty good. And I'm always like, it's fast. You know, all you have to do is like make the dough or the atta. And that takes about 15 minutes. And then you have to like actually make the roti. That takes about 15 minutes. And I'm like, that's 30 minutes. That's not a big deal.
Meanwhile,
It's so
I'm thinking,
funny.
what can I do in those 30 minutes though? So
I know.
But you're right about what you say, how even within the same relationship, that changes. So when you first meet, it's different. And later, 10 years down the road, it's different. That's probably one of the reasons many marriages don't make it, because they didn't grow in the same direction.
Or they're holding on to their previous roles and hoping that what worked before would work again.
Yeah, or unable to make that trade-off. Like, okay, you may not have what you had, before. For example, you may not have that same I just met you passion, but over time you have more security than you did back then. And maybe part of the feeling and emotions you had back then was because of the lack of security, But whatever it is, you should talk about it and just be on the same page.
Yeah, totally. I think there's so many things that can change. It can be like, there can be the superficial changes, like having kids versus not having kids, working
Right.
one job or working two jobs versus not working. So there's those peripheral things. Maybe you're caring for a aging parent or a sick child or a sick spouse. And then I think there can be the internal factors too. Like we talked about that Malaysian study, how people just internally change and what drives them towards life and what gives value changes. And then I think like there are times where people have like mental health concerns, or they just something changes within them. Like one of my aunts, she was very vocal about when she turned 40, she went through depression. And she has 3 kids. She's one of my favorite people in the entire world. And she was very vocal about, one day we were eating pronte, we're having breakfast. And she says, oh yeah, when I turned 40, I felt very depressed. And they thought it was like seasonal disorder, that some people get in the winter. And she said, they live in England. And she said, we don't see the sun for like 3-4 months. And the doctor thought it was that. They were like, oh, it's because you're not seeing the sun. You should go on a holiday, go to Spain or go somewhere where there's a sun, and it will help your body like get back in the groove. And she said it wasn't that. I just felt so depressed. Like, what have I done in my life? I've just raised kids and I've been a wife. I haven't worked. And there was like, how did I contribute to society, and she said, I felt so depressed. Even my kids knew.
Right. It's not even the age. It's just where she's at. It became like symbolic. What has she done by this milestone age?
Yeah. And it's so understandable to have that existential crisis. And the fact that she was talking openly about it, and she said my kids knew that I went through it because they knew that I was sad, and they would just come and either sit with me or spend time with me. And her kids are the most well-adjusted people. And her husband he had like a couple choices, right? He could have just been like, no, just suck it up and knock it off. Or he could have been like, I'm not going to deal with this. This is depressing. You don't get out of bed and you're just like in your bed for like 2-3 months. But he chose to be like, no, it's okay. Let's talk to someone. Let's see what we can do. You need to be in the sun. I'm going to take you to the sun. You need medication. I'll help you get medication. Like, let's try to figure it out. And I see in him, who once was like a typical Punjabi man, I see so many little things that are different about him. Like, he will wash the dishes. He will say like, hey, why don't we barbecue? And then I'll make everything, And so those transitions, those like transform who he is as a husband, but also who he is as a dad, because those kids now have been exposed to that. And what's normal has changed for them. The definition of normal has changed.
Right. And because of their love, too, over time, like if the exact same incident had happened before the kids or when they first met, he may not have responded the same way.
Yeah, that's right. Or he may not have recognized it, right? And he might have just been like, oh, she gets moody sometimes. She gets sad sometimes.
Right, because now he's got like years of he knows who she is, and if that deviates, then it's like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about, as you said, like marriages 50, 100, 200 years ago, how much they've changed,
Right.
like the definition of marriage
Right.
and maybe the institution of marriage. And look at how the changes, like we don't know when the changes happened and they're probably microscopic.
It's like your hair growing.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like the example of a change that happened. Like one man experiences this, he has a compassionate response, a compassionate, loving response to his wife being in a traumatic situation, and then he redefines their marriage, and then the kids learn something new, and maybe his brothers and sisters observe it, and her brothers and sisters, and they're like, oh, they went through this. This is how they responded. It worked. And now you have like a positive change. The same must be true when we look back 100 years, like all of the little changes that we had. Like the first man who was like, you know what? I want my wife to be able to open a bank account. Like you were talking about that just in
Right,
the 60s and 70s. Women had to have permission from their husbands, right? So some husband out there was like, yeah, of course she can have my permission, and created that first like ripple of change.
Right, yeah. And economics has dictated the role of these marriages as well. Like a long, long time ago, it economically made sense for a man to marry 3, 4 women, polygamy. And people accepted it.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a precedence of marriage being one of convenience or one of economics. And like those examples of polygamy were probably good examples of it's like, hey, we have this daughter, this land, or this kingdom, and we want to form an alliance or whatever it is. But I think that the beauty of the evolution of marriage and what we have available to us is that true relationship between two people. And I personally, I found love at a young age, and I love my husband. And I said before, like, I believe that love is a choice. And every day, I continue to choose, like, yes, this is a person that I love and I care for. I don't think love is the only thing that makes a successful marriage, though. And that sounds like negative, that I say that, but you could really love someone. I mean, look at Rihanna and Chris Brown, for God's sakes. She loved him, and he beat her to a bloody pulp. Like, love's not the only thing that makes it successful.
I think love is an important ingredient, but there are other factors, other ingredients.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like we talked about in the first episode, the communication and being able to do that. And then I love what you're saying about the roles being redefined and being willing to redefine them. It's hard to do that, though. Like, so without a third party, like a therapist or a counselor mediator, what are some things that we can do to reevaluate our roles? What do you think?
Over time, I think it just kind of happens. Like you were talking about how in the beginning you were all about gung-ho about cooking for Param and this and that. But over like few years, you're like, whatever, let me know how it is. You've redefined it without actually thinking about it. You're not like, okay, today's the day I'm redefining my role and I am not going to make rotis, It just kind of happens. So I think that as long as you have an understanding and know each other and you're honest with one another, they kind of redefine themselves, and you find yourself like looking back and saying, oh, I didn't used to do this, now I do. Or, oh, I used to do this and now I don't,
But what if one person in the relationship thinks that they are ready to reevaluate their roles and is asking for that and thinks they're being vulnerable and being open in their communication, but they're not getting a consistent response from their spouse?
I don't know, because I didn't marry that spouse.
Oh my God. Okay, Miss Dear Abby.
I didn't.
Well, you're not very good at giving advice.
It's hard to give any advice without context. You know that, right? I mean, I don't know this person. I don't know what she's doing either. I don't know, right? We're just hearing one side of this. So for all I know, she may believe that she is communicating, but she might not be, because we don't know what her measurement of communication is.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's hard to give advice. Like, I never want to turn someone away, because I feel like because I'm older and I've been married longer, people do ask me for advice. And I'm always like, man, I've just gotten lucky. Like, I don't know that much about what works and what doesn't work, like, generally speaking.
But anyone who comes to you for advice, obviously you're close enough to know their context and able to then, between your experience and your insight and your wisdom, give good advice.
Yeah, and I want people to know I'm willing to listen. So, like, that's the main thing. Like, because so many people in the world don't have anyone to talk to at all.
Sometimes that's all they need is just a listener.
Yeah, totally. But I've been saying more and more to people, like, you should just talk to someone. Like, I think there's nothing wrong with couples therapy. And I think it could be really good for you. And, I've said to you, too, like, the podcast has become like therapy for me because, like, Lisa's like my therapist.
You should talk to me.
Yes. But having someone to really, like, put everything out there. And then, you'll say to me sometimes, like, that seems kind of mean, Jaspreet. You'll say that.
Right. I'll be pretty honest.
Yeah. And then I'll sometimes say to you, like, Lisa, you're supposed to be my friend, not his friend.
I'm always your friend first, Jess.
Yeah.
No, but I 100% agree. You should talk to someone. One way or another, you should get it out. One of the things I tell Allie all the time, I think so many problems out there is because people hold things in. So many. And I always say, keep your heart clean.
Right.
Don't let debris accumulate.
Oh, I like that.
My biggest thing is to get it out. Now, what avenue you decide to pursue, you can talk to someone, but sometimes you may not have someone to talk to. So you write it down. You just do something like listen to music. I'm not saying you get it out that way, but at least you find yourself in a place where you're more willing to communicate. But basically, it's talking to someone or writing it down. I mean, I think journaling is a big thing. Once you journal, you start to understand how you're feeling a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like that self-dialogue through writing or talking to someone else and hearing some things out loud definitely helps.
And I was just going to say, and also about listening, like I was saying, sometimes someone just needs a listener. That's true, but sometimes the person also needs to hear certain things. So I think if you're wise enough, you have good judgment, you'll know when it's time to say something to the person or give advice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that you need someone who's unbiased, who's really going to give you good perspective on what's happening in the relationship.
Yeah, that too. Professional help is definitely an avenue.
I think that can be very, very difficult. And, in the Punjabi community, we often think that no therapist will understand the rules and the cultural implications of things that happen with us. And I agree to a certain extent, but I also think some of those things have become irrelevant because if someone's mean, they're mean. And if someone is putting someone into a gender role, then they're putting them into a gender role. Like, we can be honest about what they are and still get good advice, right?
100% agree. And then also in therapy, someone you don't know, you're more likely to be honest and open, which is something you need and you may not be able to do with your family.
Yeah, or you might be too scared to do it with your family too.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the thing I like about therapy is like, if you you don't have to be too embarrassed because you're never going to see that person again.
And then you suddenly run into them, you're like, whoa. Oh my God, that reminds me. Random story about running into someone you kind of know, nothing to do with therapists, but it's a good story. So I'm at the grocery store and I see this girl that I kind of talked to, but not really. We had exchanged numbers once. You know me, I think each person in my life is like a time and money footprint. That's how I look at people. And I'm like, I don't have time to have another friendship, right?
You're so mean. This person could be your kindred spirit. Like in a past life, it could have been your mom.
Just breathe. If she was my kindred spirit, I would know it. Okay? She bores me whenever I talk to her. She's fine. She's there. She loves Allie. All good enough to say, hey, what's up when we're in aisle 7, But the whole phone number thing.
What's in aisle 7? What's in aisle 7? Is it cookies?
Since you're asking, quinoa, okay? But yesterday I went to the grocery store and she was right there in front of the blueberries. And of course, I had to get blueberries. So I'm going to tell you what a bad example I am to my child. I was like, let's go. She's like, what? I was like, that girl's there. She's like, but Mama, you want to talk to her? I was like, no, I don't want to talk to her.
You're like, Allie, go get blueberries. I'll be in the milk aisle.
I should have. So then I ran to the other side. I got whatever I needed. I was done with groceries. And then I was like, I got to get blueberries. And then when I'm on my way to get it, I see her again. And I'm thinking, oh, great, she's going to want to talk to me. And this is the funny part. She walks the other way. Obviously, she wasn't interested either. So we are not kindred spirits.
That's so funny. And perfect example, like going back to your previous point, sometimes you just have to walk away and realize like, hey, these relationships aren't going to work.
Yeah, that actually is. I actually told a story because I wanted to give you that philosophical insight.
Yeah, I knew you did. I knew that.
All right, but honestly, okay. Well, let's get back to real philosophy. I have a question. Do you think that we're meant to be monogamous?
Oh, such a good question. like I studied biology, right? And I looked at evolutionary theory quite a bit. And not all animals are monogamous. Some animals have exhibited monogamous behavior over the course of their lives. I think that there are economic and political and emotional benefits to monogamy. And I'm obviously a proponent of it because if my husband was like, hey, I'm going to get additional wives, I would not be good with it.
Yeah. I mean, our system today supports monogamy. I mean, that's kind of why we live in a culture where people are, always looking for the one.
I think this idea that we're going to meet the one, just like in that book, the Alain de Botton book, which I think is fantastic, where he talks about it's not that we meet the one. We become infatuated with the person that we meet. And then in our mind, we create this idea that they're the one. And I think the secret to marriage, the one that I can't tell you what the secret is, but people are always asking about, is how do you continue to make that person the one in light of the changing relationships and situations that we're in within our life?
Yeah, that's why I subscribe to the one right now.
Yeah, you do. You say that. And you're gonna give that one 110% of your effort, right?
I will, and I own that. Like people, if they come in, if they just get to know me, like, why is she not into her husband, the one right now? What is she planning? No, it's just that's what I believe. I believe in the one right now. I've had the one right now throughout my life, which I guess now is the one back then. But we talked about this in the podcast about connections that we did. The one right now, as far as I'm concerned, happens throughout my life. Some have come as boyfriends, some have as more soul connections, some as just good soulful friends. It's the ones that help you grow, spiritually, emotionally, in whatever sense. So that's kind of how I see this. So the one right now is my husband, and I plan to carry right now forever.
Oh, so sweet. And you didn't mention your podcast co-host as being one of the ones, but that's okay. I know deep down you feel that.
You are the one. No, you're the one. Jess, you're the one.
I'm the original 1.0.
Yes,
Okay.
You're the 1.0.
I think that's so nice. And like having the freedom to not be so closely attached to the outcome that if the outcome isn't what you expect, that you're just going to be devastated by it, but still giving 110%. I think, I know they're your words and it's your actions, but I'm going to continue to embody that in my life. And I'm going to do it not only with my spouse, but also with my children and my parents as well.
Oh, it's still my goal, too. I'm not 100% there, but I know the philosophy, where I want to be.
So one piece of feedback I have gotten back from the first podcast that we did in this little marriage series, guess what it's been about, Lisa?
What?
People want to know why I don't make my bed. I've gotten comments about that, like, Jaspreet, you seem like an otherwise normal mom. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you making your bed? Someone wrote me and said, it only takes 2 minutes to make your bed, right? And I'm like, guys, why are you worried about my bed? It's really not that bad. It's not like the sheets are falling off or anything. And I'm like, people are obsessing about the bed part of the podcast, which was not the most important part of the episode.
You need to post a picture. Honestly, we all have that vision right now where it's a complete mess. So why don't you post us a picture of your unmade bed so we can all rest in our made beds?
Okay, fine. I'm going to say 2 things, okay? I think this is important for our listeners to know because obviously that some of you are obsessing over this. One is I do have a cleaning lady that comes multiple times a month to my house, and she makes my bed and does a really great job, so it's not always a mess.
So your bed's made once every 2 weeks.
And also, I'm skipping your snarky comment there. And also, my husband had gotten me this weighted blanket. It kind of helps you sleep. You told us about it, right? The gravity blanket. And that gravity blanket is so heavy when you get under it, your bed really, you can't move. So the bed doesn't get messed up. Like I'm in my sheets, my comforter, I have the gravity blanket. It looks pretty much like no one slept in it. I don't move at night. The way I go to sleep is the way I wake up.
Oh, that's why. See, I move so much because I get hot and all. My gravity blanket actually does move. So, okay.
I'm cold at night. I'm always freezing. So I'm in there. I'm tucked in. I actually have like a sheet, my comforter, and then my gravity blanket on top. And it looks like no one was in there. So all of you that are worried about thank you for being worried about like my sleep hygiene and my room hygiene, but also relax, people. It's okay.
I think you should still post a picture.
Okay, I will post a picture.
So, Lisa, this has been really great talking about marriage and communication and ways to reevaluate. I love what you said about focusing on the one for right now, because that's something that I want to embody not only with my spouse, but also with my kids and my parents and my siblings as well. Just imagine if we were to treat everyone as the most important person in our life all the time, give them 110%, what that could do to help with our relationships. And we also want to hear from you. Tell us what you think works in marriage, how you think that marriage affects the foundation of how you parent and raise your children. You can write to us on Instagram, Facebook. We love getting your text messages and emails, even when you guys are concerned about just Bree's cleanliness and making the bed or whatever it is. Share your thoughts. And as always, thanks for listening.